So let's talk about what's happening on the front line. There were 145 combat clashes on the front over the past day. The enemy attacked the most in the Huliaipol direction. The General Staff counted 34 attacks by the occupiers in the areas of Huliapol, Mern, and towards Sviatopetrivka, Zaliznikne, Dobropilia, and Starukrainka. There were 22 enemy assaults in the Pokrovsk direction, 20 in the Sloviansk direction, and 7 attacks each were recorded in the Oleksandrivka and Lyman sectors of the front. The enemy tried 3 times to break through the defensive lines of our defenders in the Kupiansk and southern Slobozhansky directions. Ruslan Muzikuk is joining the broadcast. He is the spokesperson for the National Guard of Ukraine. Mr. Ruslan, greetings to you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Greetings to you.
So, the Pokrovsk direction remains the most difficult at the moment. Could you please tell us what you can about how exactly the National Guard is currently operating there, specifically within your own area of responsibility at this time?
Right now, we see that the intensity of enemy assaults, specifically in the areas of responsibility of our units and brigades, remains quite high in the Pokrovsk direction and in the Kostiantynivka direction. And even despite the undeniable fact that during the month of February in this current year, we are recording what is essentially a staggering anti-record for the destruction of enemy infantry forces. A figure totaling just over 26,000 individual enemy infantrymen have been killed and wounded throughout the duration of this specific period. But the number of assaults still remains quite large. In particular, today we saw 22 assaults, and if we look at the past week as a whole along the line of contact, the Guards repelled just over 160 assaults, and the majority of them, almost 140, were directly on the Pokrovsk direction. That is, the enemy is trying to attack and advance, and in particular, this concerns not only the settlements themselves, but also quite active operations took place in the area of the settlements of Odachne, Shakove, Kotlin, and Pokrovsk itself. Yes, and now there are large-scale drone attacks, constant ones, as well as the use of aviation, which is aimed not only at destroying our positions and inflicting damage, but also at disrupting logistics. At the same time, I can say that even under such conditions, the enemy currently does not have any significant tactical advances because our servicemen who are holding the defense here are also using drones quite effectively. This remains, let's say, the main tool that destroys both infantry groups and equipment. And when it comes to the use of heavy bombers, it is even possible to detect and destroy logistics depots, ammunition warehouses, and equipment that is located tens of kilometers away from the line of contact.
If we compare what is happening in the Huliaipol direction and, for example, in the Pokrovsk direction, which you mentioned, what is the difference today in the Russians' objectives and in the nature of their attacks as they are now?
Well, first of all, we see that both the Huliaipol direction and in general, if we take the more southern Oleksandrivsk and Huliaipol directions, have become quite active, and the enemy, despite the fact that it was considered that there was a relatively low tempo of clashes here in recent weeks and months, let's say, tried to rely on sudden advances, capturing settlements, and directly advancing toward Huliaipol. Now, every day we see that the tempo of clashes here is, again, quite high, and the nature of the terrain plays its role. It is different from, let's say, the industrial agglomerations in Luhansk and Donetsk regions. And in turn, we see that even though the enemy tried to seize, so to speak, the initiative and create preconditions for expanding both the gray zone and their offensives, now the defense forces have managed quite effectively to carry out search and strike operations, generally stabilize the situation in these areas, particularly in the Oleksandrivka direction, and even conduct counterattacks. Of course, the number of infantry groups currently being deployed, being involved in assaults is quite large. However, in recent weeks, for example, there have not been any major mechanized assaults here. And again, there is a large number of drones always present here, especially in areas that are more flat, with fewer buildings and less varied terrain. That's why the enemy is once again actively using various types of drones here, including loitering munitions. The defense forces are currently doing significant work to destroy these types of drones, let's say wing-type drones and loitering munitions, in order to prevent the enemy from gathering intelligence and inflicting damage with such UAVs.
Will Ukraine surrender Donbas for the sake of an illusory peace? Recently, this question has become a common tool for manipulation in the global media landscape. However, today Zelensky made a very clear statement that leaves absolutely no room for double interpretation. According to the publication Glavred, the president of Ukraine has officially confirmed Kiev's position ahead of decisive diplomatic meetings. Why? The government in Kiev rejects any official plans for trading territory for peace. How did the U.S. administration react to this, and why is it happening now? This particular statement has now become critically important and of profound significance for the entire Ukrainian people, resonating deeply across every corner of the nation as they face these challenging times together for their future.
There is a sense that Ukraine may not be able to win this war outright, and that the nation must give up some sovereign territory in exchange for its long-term freedom and make incredibly difficult and complex strategic decisions.
Can you win this war? Well, that depends on what people mean when they say win. And in fact, it is very difficult, especially when we are talking about territories. First of all, how to get all that land back. Today, that is incredibly difficult and complex, and it would mean far too many lost people and the loss of many precious lives. And at this moment, it's very difficult. But we must consider what is actually good for the future of Russia. We're all on the battlefield. That's why they won't win, and we are not losing the course.
Winning this phase of the war is the absolute priority. If that is truly the case, why not just stop worrying about the cities of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk? If that is what is really needed right now, why not do exactly that?
This is our territory, and it sounds absolutely incredible and deeply strange. Why should we flee and run away from our very own land? Why did they occupy our sacred land, and no one can drive them out of our territory? But you, standing here today,
You are talking about the loss of life. You are talking about the desire to end the war. If you gave up, this is, of course, the specific argument that Donald Trump frequently made. If you gave up control over these major cities, the issues would simply stop. In one notable example,
just think for a moment, if we were to give up this territory, including Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, at that very moment, at that exact moment, the 200,000 innocent people who are living there right now will immediately be occupied by the Russian forces. Who told the Russians that these people are ready to become Russians? And if they are not, then they will simply proceed to kill them. Or they will send them to the front, or they will send them to prison. They did the same things in Luhansk, in Donetsk, and in Crimea. And so,
let us be honest, this is a red line. Would you truly hand over territory that Russia did not take on the battlefield just for the sake of preserving peace? I think
that this right here is
This is not merely a symbolic red line. It represents a critical defensive boundary that cannot be crossed. This firm statement serves as a direct and uncompromising response to the various behind-the-scenes discussions regarding so-called compromise plans currently being debated. Kiev is making its position crystal clear to all of its international partners. Any strategy that involves appeasing the aggressor at the direct expense of sovereign Ukrainian land is not a solution. Instead, such a path is a dangerous road leading toward a total strategic disaster for the entire region. The President's position is based on the Constitution and international law, where our borders remain the only legitimate reality. It's important to understand the timing of this statement. As the editor-in-chief writes, Zelensky made this point precisely on the eve of trilateral consultations involving the Trump administration. This is a clear signal to the White House. Ukraine is ready for diplomacy, but not for capitulation. For the Kremlin, this is also a painful blow. Putin had hoped that under Western pressure, Kiev would become more accommodating. However, Zelensky's response shatters those hopes. Ukraine is approaching the negotiating table from a position of strength and moral rightness, where territorial integrity is not up for negotiation. The editor-in-chief specifically draws attention to the military component. The president would not make such statements if the defense forces did not have solid grounds for it. Thanks to unwavering resilience in Donbas and the latest technological solutions, Ukraine is successfully keeping the situation under control. Zelensky made it clear, every square meter of Ukrainian land in the east is soaked with the blood of heroes, and to surrender it at the negotiating table would be a betrayal of those who gave their lives. The army supports this position of the president, which creates a strong internal alliance on this issue between the political and military leadership. Zelensky's statement about the impossibility of territorial concessions is a moment of truth. We will never surrender or give up what is rightfully ours. We fight for every single Ukrainian, and this unity is our most powerful weapon against any aggressor and any pressure. Do you support the president's firm decision not to make any territorial concessions, even under the threat of a prolonged war? Do you believe that diplomacy without giving up territory is possible with Trump acting as a mediator? Share your opinion in the comments.